try one more time here to record the first part of the lecture from May 4th. And I have no way of knowing if I'm getting across to anybody. Again, uh, there's there's nobody here but me sitting in the room, and nobody on the other end of cyberspace here. So I'm looking things over as carefully as I can. I hope I have shared screen. At the bottom, it does say I can go to stop screen. That should indicate that I have shared screen. My microphone hasn't uh, been unplugged. I feel like I'm getting ready for takeoff here, checking all these things. I definitely just don't want to do it again. 3 times on the same lecture. Can you imagine if you had to sit through one of them 3 times? I'm going to make this one as not short, a little bit more abbreviated, leave out the fluff if there's any, and get right to the point on anything. Now, the screen, the module, it's after week 14 here. The module changed the appearance of it since May 4th. So when you go to the second one, it would look different, but all the materials the same. All the materials here. The change is that I grouped together all the material that you're going to have for L3, P4, and the final exam. I grabbed it out of the other modules so that you don't have to go hunting and pecking and asking, well, is this one on the test? Is that one on the test? Here's what's on the test down here. Okay. It's a lot of material, but you've gone over it already at least once, possibly more if you've been studying, which I hope you have. Okay. So the integumentary system is on the test. I'm not going to talk about it today, however, because that was not part of May 4th lecture. Okay. Uh, the nervous tissue we went over for a second time and followed it up with a recording here on the 13th for this one. There's a further recording on the 20th, which would cover anything that I have lectured and indicated was on the 20th here and here. Okay. Uh, I might do better to group the recordings together. I'll decide that after we've talked, and the dates are self-explanatory. Okay. Okay. I'm coming down past the beginning tissue and the supplemental lecture for that. And I may not have started here, but this was included. I went to the website, and I'm going to watch carefully because this is maybe where we lost the recording. I'm going to go to our website, my old website. I call it old, but it's as modern as it can be, actually. And I want to go over the photos with you that we did not complete before. So I'm going down here to histology slides, bottom of the page under unit 4. And you'll recall, I hope, that we went through the epithelial tissues, okay, and in parentheses were 2 of them, which will not be included. Then we went through the connective tissues. These are all recorded from previous lecture. We went through the muscle tissue, and I showed you the slide of the neuron and the spinal cord. What I didn't do is any of the organs that you see over here. Oh, enlarge that a little bit and get my own picture off of the page. Okay. So from the salivary gland down to the testes, these were not shown to you. These will be on P3. That's practical. I'm sorry, P4, the last practical examination. Okay. This is salivary gland. We have a much better picture of salivary gland that I'll show you in a moment. But this is typical salivary gland, and by typical, it just doesn't look like anything. There's fat throughout it. That's the white material. There are ducts right here, cut across. The rest of the material here are acinar cells. Acinar cells are those that secrete enzymes, usually for digestion. This is secreting salivary amylase for the digestion of carbohydrate. That's the function of the salivary gland, along with an actually more important function to lubricate the food being chewed and swallowed. If you have difficulty with the salivary gland, um, my trick to remembering it when I'm asked, what is this? And it's salivary gland, is to say to myself, I have no idea what that is. And if I have no idea what it is, then think, now, when I met all these slides, when I met all these people, which one didn't I catch the name of? Which one was it that I just could not put a handle to? And when that happens, you remember, oh yeah, well, since I don't know it, I'm going to just call it salivary gland. You'll be right. You'll be right most of the time, anyway. So when you don't recognize one, always think, could it be salivary gland? Backing up, the tongue. Tongue's an easy one. Tongue gives itself away because of the taste buds that you see here. Okay? And those need to be remembered. The actual epidermis here is stratified squamous, but the taste buds help give the tongue away. The esophagus slide shows the lumen of the esophagus going around. You don't get to see the end like a river that made a big bend here. It's the esophagus obviously is one tube. So what's this island in the middle of it? It's not in the middle. It's attached at our right side. And when something is swallowed, this moves out of the way or disappears because the entire esophagus will expand in circumference, and that'll pull this or stretch this uh, into the wall. The lumen is over here as well. You see this little bump? That corresponds to this area. It's been magnified. And you notice that we have multi-layered epithelium. Epithelium covers or lines. In this case, it's lining the lumen. If it's multi-layered, it's stratified. And there's only two types of stratified epithelium that we're doing. Stratified squamous and transitional. Transitional is also stratified, but it takes a look at the very outermost cells, the ones closest to the lumen. Are they flat? Yes, they are. Now, every one of them doesn't need to be flat, but if any of them are flattened, then we consider this stratified squamous. The upper esophagus is stratified squamous. The lower esophagus, approximately 50-50. The lower esophagus is simple columnar epithelium. The rest of the GI tract, stomach, small and large intestine, they're all lined by also simple columnar epithelium. The stomach, this particular slide, many of the slides that you get off of the internet, uh, can be deceptive. So sometimes it really helps to have a book alongside of you. Our textbook is great for this. You can look up stomach, look up the page that has the photo micrograph and the picture like this taken with a microscope. It'll help you immensely. Okay. Uh, so let me break this one down for you. Here's the lumen up here. We don't see much of the lumen. We think of the stomach. We think of when it's empty, how big and hollow it is. Well, yes, that's true, but the photograph does not waste its time photographing the hollowness of the lumen. It's up here. This is the lumen. And this is the part of the stomach that abuts or touches the lumen. And since I told you already that the GI tract is lined exclusively, except for the upper esophagus, with simple columnar cells, these are all simple columnar cells. These are not villi that I'm going around. In villi, you have projections into the lumen, and they don't all end nice and smooth and straight across. These do. These are not projections in. These are slices or caverns, if you will, going down. They're called gastric pits, a term that I will not ask you. It's not on any of your study guides, but you can hear it. These are the gastric pits. And the digestive enzymes are released, formed and released down at the bottom of the gastric pits and empty into the lumen. Now, since this is an internal organ, we would expect smooth muscle, and in the stomach, a lot of smooth muscle. That's what this is down here. I skipped one, I'm sorry. The small intestine. We've seen this slide before, at least the one on the right. These are villi, okay, and they are lined by the microvilli. The microvilli make up an epithelium that's composed of simple columnar epithelium again. Function, of course, of the small intestine is digestion and absorption of all classes of food. It's the principal site of digestion in the body. Over on the other side, it's the same material. This picture was taken on a different part of the same slide. It's just the orientation. We have, in this case, some villi coming out towards us, right down in here. Okay, we can't see them. We can only see their bottoms, if that's the word, okay? And not all villi are nice finger-like projectiles, okay? This sort of looks like a finger that's been hit with a hammer. Here it looks a little bit more typical. We really can't say that this is atypical because both of them represent the epithelium of the small intestine. It's the picture on the right that I keep showing you, though, that you'll be quizzed on. The large intestine, I particularly like this picture on the left. It's a lot nicer than some of the others. The large intestine is lined by simple columnar epithelium. Okay. It looks like some sort of massive octopus with tentacles coming out with suckers on it. That's the way I remember it. You pick your way. These clear areas are goblet cells. Okay, and we actually have goblet cells in the epithelium of the stomach and small intestine. They increase in numbers as we go from one organ to the next. But when we finally get to the colon, they're very numerous. The goblet cells produce mucus, to help move the contents along. Function of the colon is the reabsorption of water and the compaction of waste. We have better pictures of pancreas. When I did this lecture last week, I left the site to get a better picture of pancreas. We're going to have that in a moment anyway. I think when I left the site, that's when the video broke, if I can call it that. So I'm not going to do that. I'll wait till we get to the better picture too. But in this pancreas, the main thing is to see this clear area here, clearer area. Here it is enlarged. There's another one down here that seems to be smaller, but this larger one is about average. And if you think of apples bobbing in water, and maybe you push one down partway underneath the water, like this one, it's the same size apple, it's the same size structure. It just doesn't appear that way because of the way this is cut. Okay. This is an islet of Langerhans. The islets of Langerhans are the places where the alpha and beta cells reside that produce insulin and glucagon. Glucagon is a hormone that helps to move the sugar into the blood, and it's produced by the alpha cells. You do need to know this little bit of trivia. Alpha cells produce glucagon. Sometimes you just have to take something on faith. It's not terribly important to us, but it will be in physiology, and they want you to learn it here. Alpha cells produce glucagon. Beta cells produce insulin, and the insulin factors in and has a main function of taking sugar and facilitating its movement into the tissues. Into the tissues. Okay. This is typical liver. Okay, it looks sort of like some sort of mahjong or whatever playing tiles, and every one of them has at least one nice central vein. This area here that I'm outlining is a lobule. That's the physiological unit of the liver. Here's another central vein over here. Here's one over here. This is not a central vein, I don't believe. It's just a feeder into the central vein. At every corner where three cells come together, 1, 2, 3, we have a triad. There's a triad over here. Other triads would exist around this six-sided lobule. There would be actually a total of 6 triads around any lobule. The triads, using your book, and also you don't have to go that far. You can actually just go to the models that are labeled for you. Okay. I'll be trying to show you those right now. The triads consist of 3 things: a bile duct, an artery, a regular circulatory artery, and a bit of hepatic portal vein. The hepatic portal vein comes from the small intestine, having picked up blood nutrients that have not yet entered into the body because they came from the digestive system. They're brought, those blood and nutrients, in an impure state. They're brought right to the liver and dumped in, and they make their way filtering to the central vein. Once they reach the central vein, they've been processed Okay, by processed, I mean detoxified. Maybe not getting rid of everything that we don't want, but at least reducing the amount of maybe poisonous or toxic material. Once anything reaches the central vein, it will return to the general circulation. We've seen the kidney slide many times. This is the first slide we actually looked at. Recall that this is the glomerulus here, the glomerular space. It'll be filled with plasma pressed out of the glomerulus. Behind that, this structure here is Bowman's capsule, composed of simple squamous epithelium. The kidney tubules, the ones that are near the glomeruli, are all convoluted, proximal and distal convoluted, or tubules. So they're still kidney tubules, and they're going to be lined, as you can see over here, with simple cuboidal cells. Remember that the glomeruli are always located in the cortex of the kidney. The eye never gives anybody trouble. If you can remember it, do yourself a favor. You don't need to pay attention to the left image. It's a little confusing. I'm going to point it out anyway, though. This is the top of the lens. Okay, you wouldn't necessarily know that. This is the ciliary body. This is the muscle that attaches to the lens, but we don't see the point of attachment because of the way the slide was cut. So not worrying about the left image, worry, in fact, about the right one, okay? When you see these lines, to me, it look like a field that's been harvested or even a lawn that's been mowed. When I see that, I know eye is in front of me. Look for the dark band. The dark band is always the choroid coat. And on one side of it is always the retina. And the other side, maybe you didn't think anything was over here, but there sure is. It's full. This is the thick protective sclera. Lung tissue looks like sponge. Don't rely on color, okay? Because these slides that you'll see of lung on the internet or in your book, they're all different colors, but they all look something like this. This is a large bronchiole down here, by the way. You see a part of it. But here are your alveolar sacs, and the alveolus itself is the smallest little chamber like this, like this, like that. And the lung is the site of external respiration. I said it correctly now. External respiration. Internal respiration is at the tissue level. Okay. Any air that's in the bronchiole is still external to the body. Oh, it's inside the body, but it's not become a part of the body. Like swallowing a marble, it's never going to be part of the body. Okay. But once it's taken in at the alveolus, which is the functional unit of the respiratory system, okay, once it's been taken in, then that was done by the process of external respiration. The skin on the right, you've seen that one. This is really just primarily epidermis and some dermis. Epidermis is up here, down through here. This is actually the top layer, the stratum corneum. It's quite thick in this case. And here are the other four layers, the lowest one being the stratum basale. Below that is the dermis. The epidermis is composed of stratified squamous epithelium, but the dermis, more irregular, is composed of dense, irregular connective tissue. Within the dermis, there can be organs within organs. And here we see this one with little tubules, this with many little tubules. These are sweat glands. Sudoriferous glands. And they're also merocrine glands because they secrete fluid only. The sebaceous glands are oil glands that here, here, and here. These are holocrine glands because they secrete, in addition to fluid, they secrete whole cells. The secretion from sebaceous gland is sebum. This slide of the ovary doesn't show us a lot. It shows us a follicle with an ovum in it. This is a follicle for the future. It has not developed yet. The follicle is stimulated by, the development of the follicle is stimulated by the release of follicle stimulating hormone from the anterior pituitary. This slide gives everybody trouble. It doesn't need to. So just hit your head or do something to remember this one. It's always on every test. It's going to be there. This is seminiferous tubules of the testes. Now, the testes is a sex organ, but it also is an endocrine gland because it secretes testosterone. These tubules are interconnected, but they gyrate or move up, down, right, left so much. It would be like looking down on a roller coaster and then being able to cut it, looking at the top down, being able to slice it, and you would disassociate the different tracks from each other if you did that. Okay, now if you don't understand what I mean, don't worry about it. Get the book out, look at seminiferous tubules, and make your own way of comparing. Okay, I'm going to get off of that now. Being careful not to lose my shared screen. It's so nice when something goes wrong and I can have somebody say, "Hey, we can't hear you anymore," or just even wave their hands. But I have to take it on faith right now. I listen to other instructors' recordings. They have the same problems. Some have more problems than I do. Uh, uh, I'm just happy that every problem I've had so far, except to record last week a 90-minute blank. Uh, when I've been with you, our problems have lasted no more than a couple of minutes. I'm looking at my newly arranged study material also, and I want to see the endocrine system. Here it is. Okay, because I did lecture about this on the 4th, and you're going to say maybe that no, you already did that. I did part of it. I didn't do the, I did the upper part here, but I'll remind you, please know the definition of a hormone. Okay. Here are the characteristics, which we've gone over already, and they're on a previous recording. Target organ. Okay. Know what a target organ is. You need to know the endocrine glands and their secretion and what the secretion does. And we went over from there all the way down. Oh, I wish I could get it right, but that's close enough. We did all those. Okay. We did the anterior and posterior pituitary. Got to know them by their other names, though. The posterior pituitary neurohypophysis, do remember that that's nervous tissue, the only endocrine gland not composed of glandular epithelium. All the rest are composed of glandular epithelium. The anterior pituitary is the adenohypophysis as well. 2 hormones for the posterior and 7 for the anterior. Okay, now on Tuesday last week, when I was attempting to make a recording, uh, everybody could hear my voice. I recorded my voice fine and my face. Oh God! But we weren't looking at anything. Okay, you have this chart. Everything that I'm talking about right now is on the internet on Canvas for our class. You can find all of this material there when you need to study, and it's in that grouping that I just left that I showed you that I'd rearranged. Okay, the thyroid gland. Thyroid gland is next. You need to know that it only secretes 2 hormones. Thyroid hormone, TH. Please know the abbreviations. Thyroid hormone increases the basic metabolic rate throughout the body. Now that's important in development from an infant to adulthood. Otherwise, you are not going to develop what we consider properly. You'll have shortened limbs, stubby limbs, bowed bones, okay? And you don't want that. So we want thyroxine to be there throughout our life. We don't even want to worry about it. And we want the second hormone, calcitonin. Calcitonin helps to regulate the deposition of calcium into bones. I'll just leave it at that and then go right to the parathyroid, which is secreting parathyroid hormone. And parathyroid hormone is pH, not like the acidity alkalinity measure, which is small p, capital H. These are both uppercase letters. Parathyroid hormone also acts to uh, regulate the deposition of calcium into developing bone. Okay. So is it doing the same thing as calcitonin? No, it's going to do the opposite thing. One says go this way, one says the other. One says more calcium, one says less calcium. And that's to keep it on keel at a homeostatic or midpoint. Okay. In other words, if you had a tug of war going and you have 2 sides pulling and they're of equal strength, then they're going to stop at some point and never move again. But if one side secretes too much, or more common, the other side secretes too little, then the rope is going to move. And the amount of calcium balance is going to be upset. Pancreas, okay, probably the most important of the examples. The pancreas is an endocrine gland. It's also a digestive gland. So it fits into 2 categories. It secretes insulin and glucagon, as we said a moment ago. The function of insulin, you need to commit this guide to memory if you haven't already. Insulin stimulates the absorption of sugar into the tissue from the blood. All your tissues that are living need to have sugar. Okay, sugar is a bad word to some people, but your brain cannot live without glucose. That's the only source of energy it will function on. So you must have it. If you don't have enough uh, going in, you're in trouble. If you don't have enough insulin, in other words, you have diabetes. And there are different types of diabetes, but we're not going into the types. If you're diabetic, you'll have less insulin. So the function of insulin, of moving the sugar into the tissue, is going to be reduced. And when that happens to an extreme, your brain will not necessarily get enough sugar to function. Your tissues will not get enough sugar to function. Glucagon works the opposite way. It stimulates the conversion of uh, material into sugar and puts it into the blood. Okay, so it goes the opposite direction. If there were no glucagon, the insulin would direct all of the sugar into the tissues, leaving the blood sugarless and the brain at the mercy of the uh, sugarless blood. And that wouldn't do. So we don't want insulin to do all the work. We want to counter it in that tug of war with glucagon. Glucagon can take excess sugar out of the blood and store it as this substance here, glycogen. Okay. At night, when we're not doing very much, except possibly sleeping, uh, the body converts glycogen into, the body converts glucose in the blood to glycogen and stores it in the liver. Glycogen is considered an inert form of sugar, a storage product. Well, that glycogen will be reconverted to sugar and returned to the blood when it's needed, when you perk up, usually in the morning. You can speed that along with caffeine if you drink coffee or cola and get more sugar into the blood in the morning. I've had people faint in my classes a number of times, and their glucagon has uh, returned some sugar into the blood, but they usually come to class having not eaten breakfast, maybe not eaten much the night before, maybe they don't eat much, period. They're always on the borderline. And they come to class and faint because they got low blood sugar. A lack of insulin or deficiency of insulin leads to hyperglycemia, high blood sugar. A lack of glucagon leads to low blood sugar, hypoglycemia. The adrenal glands produce steroids. You can call them, as I have here, corticosteroids, mineralocorticosteroids, but to keep it easy, or to keep it just clear, the steroids. Okay. I'm not going to ask you this, but as a human being, you and I take things for granted sometimes. Who the hell knows what a steroid is? Who can define it? Write it on paper. Well, there's a couple of people who are at the gym all the time, and they may have looked it up, but most people don't have a clue what a steroid is. But there are a couple that they know. The adrenal glands produce in their cortex, that's where we get the cortico, in the cortex, they produce cortisone, which is a pain reliever, okay, and aldosterone, which you may not have heard of. The aldosterone has its effect on the kidney and the reabsorption of water by the distal convoluted tubules. Just like the kidney, the adrenal glands have a cortex and they have a medulla. And in the medulla, the adrenal glands produce epinephrine. Epinephrine, also known as norepinephrine, adrenaline, and noradrenaline, in various forms. They're all slightly different. This is the substance for fight or flight. This is what really activates the nervous system through the sympathetic nervous system, getting ready for fight or flight. Ovaries. Ovaries produce estrogen from their follicles. Ovaries also produce progesterone from the corpus luteus or luteum. Now, these are two different things. The follicle has an egg in it, an ovum, then it erupts and becomes the corpus luteum. All the time that it's active, the follicle that's enlarging and going to release the egg starts producing uh, estrogen. Estrogen reaches the entire body, but has an effect on the anterior pituitary and counteracts, turns off FSH. FSH was previously saying, develop a follicle. Well, we did that. So quit sending the message. We don't want another one right now. I want to see if we can get this one to work. Once the ovum has been released and the corpus luteum begins to form, it will produce hormone, and it will tell the pituitary gland the same thing. The same thing. The corpus luteum produces progesterone. Progesterone and estrogen do the same thing. They cut the performance of FSH. Now, if pregnancy doesn't ensue, these will give out quickly, and then the estrous cycle begins again. And the FSH is not inhibited. Instead, it's replenished and goes to the ovary and starts the cycle again. The testes produce testosterone, which is important for male sex secondary characteristics. Deep voice, for instance, beard, you know, all things that are so important, I guess, to the guys. A lot of commercials on television these days. Testosterone this, get more testosterone from that. You know, all end up looking like the Hulk. Okay, the pineal gland, the last one, in the brain. The pineal gland or pineal body produces melatonin. And this prepares the body for sleep. It regulates the so-called circadian cycle or circadian rhythm. I've never tried melatonin myself. I don't like to take any type of drug that alters my ability to think or my brain or anything like that. I just have this crazy fear. Uh, when I was younger, I was fearless, but not anymore. Okay, there's a diagram here that I did not go through on Tuesday last week, and I just asked them to take a quick look at it. If you need to have a feeling for where these glands are located, they're all listed right here. Okay. Okay, and then I had almost finished everything. And I move down to 429. This was there at that time, but it's now more complete. Additional models for P4. I showed it and I went over it, but then I decided to go home and add labels because it was pretty naked without the labels. So here's an ovary. Okay. Here's the follicle, which develops into the corpus luteum, which produces progesterone. After the corpus luteum has finished its so-called tour of duty, it will become scar tissue, which you have three examples here. Corpus albicans. No function for the corpus albicans. It's just there. We don't get rid of it. Okay. These are future follicles here. This is the erupted follicle. The follicle itself produces estrogen. There's the ovum. These are a collection of slides, not necessarily put in any particular order. There is order to it, but now all of a sudden we jump to a kidney and a ureter. And I promise you, you'll see this on a better slide in just a moment. You would want to ask yourself as you're going through this, anything you can. With the ureter, for instance, you should ask yourself, what type of epithelium does it have in the lumen? Transitional epithelium. If you just go through and just name things, well, that's already in front of your eyes. Say whatever else comes to mind. And sometimes nothing comes to mind. Maybe you need to look that one up. Here's the trachea area. This is the anterior view. This is your Adam's apple, but we can't call it that. We call it thyroid cartilage. Right underneath it, a big piece of cricoid cartilage. And then the cartilaginous C rings that are open on the backside to allow expansion and swallowing. All three types of cartilage here, C ring, cricoid, and thyroid, are hyaline cartilage. For reference, here's the hyoid bone. On the posterior side, the most notable thing is the epiglottis, which closes over the entrance into the trachea when we're swallowing. Epiglottis must be remembered that it's elastic cartilage. These two structures here are arytenoid cartilages, and here's the cricoid cartilage on the posterior side. Looks much larger, expands out. The cricoid cartilage and arytenoid cartilage, those are both hyaline cartilage. The hyaline cartilage is the most common type of cartilage that we have, and all cartilage is avascular, has no blood system within it, only around it. Here's the thyroid gland, shown on one side only and removed on the other side. Embedded in it are on each side two parathyroid glands. Look how small they are. Tiny, tiny, tiny. Okay. We have four parathyroids, two on showing here and two that are not showing. The muscle down the back or posterior side of the trachea is called the trachealis, which helps in swallowing. This large muscle here is a different muscle than the trachealis. It's overlying it. This is the trachealis. In asking you this muscle, if I were to, because I don't have it labeled here, I would be pointing to the lighter material, the deeper material. Here's a picture of the stomach up here, unlabeled, but the spleen, I want you to notice its location. This is the large intestine with a tinea coli. There are 3 tinea coli bands. One's here, can't see it, and one's on the underside, can't see it. But they contract unequally and cause the formation of these pouches called haustra. A singular is a haustrum. The serous membrane that attaches the colon to the body wall, and in this case also to the pancreas, is this. This is the mesocolon. Your organs internally just cannot bounce around or flop around all over the place. They've got to have some flexibility, but they got to have some controlled flexibility. Mesocolon helps with that. There are a lot of models of the female system, and I've got another, I believe, to show you, but they're all quite uh, quite a lot the same. Okay. This is the ovary. When the egg is released from the ovary, it is captured by this, yes, monstrous looking structure. It's called the os fimbriae, which is the term I will use on our test. You may find in a book or someplace that it's also called the infundibulum. And that's true, it is. But it's a multiple choice test, and I'm not going to put both answers on there. I'm going to put os fimbriae. The egg then travels through the oviduct, is normally fertilized right about here, halfway along the oviduct. The oviduct might also be called by other names, the uterine tube, uh, the fallopian tube, but I'm going to call it the oviduct on the exam. Okay. The fertilized egg then would implant inside of the uterus, which is here, and stay there for the gestation period, but leave through the cervix, the partition between the vagina down here and the uterus. This is the cervix. The cervix is hyaline cartilage. The rib-like structures that you see here and also up here in the uterus are rugae. Okay. I didn't name this one. This is the ovarian ligament, and it's unnamed because, frankly, it's not going to be asked on the test. I didn't intend to teach it to you, but at the same time, I don't like to leave things blank like this. Better picture coming up of this. This is just the location of the prostate gland in the male. So trust me, we'll see a better picture. Here's a different model, not showing anything different. Here's the ovary. Here's the infundibulum. You get the idea that these are artists' conceptions because they're so different. And this is unlabeled, but this you should recognize now as the ovary. The adrenal gland, also known as the suprarenal gland. Below it, the bladder itself. From the kidney to the bladder is the ureter. Now here's the better picture. Here's the kidney. Here's the ureter. And what should the ureter go to? Well, the bladder, of course. Where's the bladder? Is that it? No, that's fat. Here's the bladder. This guy who's holding this is holding it by the bladder. It's stretching the ureter straight. Bladder looks to be pretty big. This is the thymus gland. The thymus gland is part of the immune system. I gave this talk about the thymus gland in the second part of this under lymph. Okay, so you should have those notes. Here's a picture of spleen. Function of spleen is to destroy aging red blood cells and also act as a storage for platelets. Same picture, but pointing out now the mesenteries proper that interconnect the parts of the small intestine. Not to shortchange the picture, here's the diaphragm. Here's some lung. Here's the liver. And here's the greater omentum, the fatty tissue that covers the anterior of the abdomen. This kidney model is asking or pointing out this one structure here, the ascending loop of Henle. How do we know that? Well, we know that the model is probably labeled correctly, but let's see if we can figure this out. The yellow solid areas here are the glomerulus. Bowman's capsule has been removed. And when the plasma enters or leaves the glomerulus, it first goes to the proximal convoluted tubule, which I'm following right now, and going down. And this is the descending loop of Henle. Usually I draw it on the other side, but it makes no difference. Here's the actual loop of Henle. Here's the ascending loop of Henle. And now it's starting to curve again in the distal loop of Henle and enters into the collecting duct. The cortex is out here. The medulla is down here. And the separation between the two is the arcuate artery and vein. This is a nice model of the kidney, but it's meant to show arcuate artery. Here's both of them, artery and vein. But in the artery, the blood's come in, and now it's in the cortex and it's moving out. These very precise looking arterioles. These are cortico-radiate arteries. The book will call it that. Everybody calls them cortico-radiate arteries. And we allow ourselves this indiscretion, really. They're arterioles. They're inside of an organ. They shouldn't be called arteries, but they are called arteries. And there's other places in anatomy where things have been misnamed, but the name has stuck. So I will call them cortical radiate arteries. They're also known as interlobular arteries. Okay. Interlobular artery there, arcuate here, then the lobar artery down here. Okay. But for our purposes, we're going to have to go with lobar artery, arcuate artery, and then cortico-radiate. Cortico-radiate certainly does make a lot of sense. They're in the cortex and they radiate away from it. This is pointing out, but is unlabeled, but it does have the pointer. This is the greater omentum again. Now, to get your orientation on it, you might be able to see the forearm back here and would guess that the head's underneath the person's hand. Well, that's true. This is liver, liver, liver down here, liver over here. This is a picture of a model that we use in the classroom all the time. Liver. There's about 10 functions of the liver in your book. I've given you 4. You have them. The detoxification of blood, maintenance of blood pressure, and you need to know the basic functions of the liver, maintenance of homeostasis, storage of glycogen, production of bile. In the production of bile, the bile is produced by and released through the hepatic duct. There's actually 2 hepatic ducts. And then when they come together, they're still called the hepatic duct. They join with the cystic duct from the gallbladder. The gallbladder produces nothing, it just stores the bile. But only if it hasn't been called for or put in use. The bile goes down the common bile duct. Once the cystic and hepatic are joined, we have the common bile duct, which terminates in a small bubble, which is the ampulla vator. That can enlarge like a balloon and hold more bile, but pretty soon, if no bile is needed for digestion or emulsification, this has got to give because the pressure is going to build up throughout the entire system. And so it dribbles out through the sphincter of Oddi small amounts of bile so that you still have a fully loaded charge of bile behind it without damaging the organs. This is the skin. Here's the epidermis, very small in comparison when you see the whole model. The dermis, I think this is pink, goes all the way down to here. And the hypodermis, which is not a part of the skin, is down here. The dermis is also called the corium. The dermis is composed of dense, irregular connective tissue. The epidermis is composed of stratified squamous epithelium. Here are sweat glands right here, just a series of tubules secreting, and when they secrete in the sweat, there's no place for it to go but to follow a duct. So these glands have ducts. This is a sweat gland here, cut. Here's a sweat gland here, different shape, doesn't matter. Okay. And the glands are also known as sudoriferous glands. What are they composed of? What kind of tissue? Glandular epithelium. Got to remember anything that has lobes or anything that is named gland is going to have glandular epithelium in it. Here's sebaceous gland. Then when it's cut, it's here. Remember, sebaceous is holocrine. Sudoriferous is merocrine. This is the location of the adenoid, which we're going to call the pharyngeotonsil, part of the lymph system. A lot of what we call T cells are located there. So when we get an infection, it will fight it. Unfortunately, that causes us some discomfort. I certainly get discomfort from the palatine tonsil, which is down here behind the tongue, when it does its job. This model is part schematic and part artistic of the nephron. Now, we'll start with the part that goes at 90-degree angles to everything else. These are the arcuate vein and arcuate artery. They're being fed by the lobar artery and the lobar vein. Okay? Not, or actually, the vein is going the other direction. Follow the artery with me. Lobar artery, arcuate artery, and now this was originally referred to as the interlobular artery, but now I told you it's the cortico-radiate artery. It goes up, and off of it is an afferent arteriole and goes to the glomerulus. There's not just one of these afferent arterioles. There's many. There's many. They're not shown. Here's the glomerulus. Now, I don't know if that is greenish yellow. You'll know if I'm right or wrong. You know what I'm pointing at. The shell is Bowman's capsule. When the plasma is pressed out, it goes through this structure, the proximal convoluted tubule, descending loop of Henle at the bottom, ascending loop of Henle, and then when it starts to curve again, the distal convoluted tubule to the collecting duct. Going into the glomerulus, we had the afferent arteriole, but the blood just doesn't disappear. It has some plasma removed, but the rest of the blood comes out through the efferent arteriole. And then it spreads in a hairnet-like fashion to form the vasa recta, which reabsorbs wanted, desirable material from the loop of Henle. The things that get all the way through the loop of Henle are waste products. The stomach itself is shown here to remind you that these internal organs have smooth muscle, with the exception of the heart, of course, with cardiac muscle. These are rugae, and over here, this is the pyloric sphincter. Okay, once I process this recording, and I'm assuming I'm going to be successful with that, it's going to go right above this one. It'll be 5/4, the date it was originally given, recording first part. Okay, I'm just taking a quick look over here, so forgive me, just to be sure I haven't skipped something. No, and time-wise, I took the same amount of time as I did with them, so I believe I have everything here. Okay, thank you, thank you. I'm going to back out and stop the recording, and then get this up.